choice. Take me back to where I came from before I ever even had a name.
Ooh, harsh cut.
Hey.
Hey, here we are on Soul Vibe.
Wow,
How you doing, Thomas Ardavani?
I love watching that little lead in. It makes me just sweeps me right away.
Yeah.
Takes me right into a whole nother
really well done.
Vibe. Into a soul vibe. That's where it takes me. It makes my soul vibe.
Into a soul vibe. For sure.
Soul vibe. So here we are.
Another segment.
Here we are. Are we really here is the question, right? Are we here? Here we are, but are we really here? Are we really here?
That's all relative, right? Here, there, everywhere.
Are we here? Yeah, well, it's quite a journey. I think we left off in the depths of self-remembering, the attempt at ascribing a tangible definition to what that wonderful suggestion may lead us to, self-remembering. Very powerful tool as a human being if you hope to evolve. And it was fun. I guess we were going to get into the results of some of the folks that have actually endeavored into self-remembering and the extraordinary beings that they became. That they blah 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 that they became, right?
That they became.
Did you like pull up some Rumi and some Hafiz?
Yeah, I have their books here.
Yeah.
Being that I like to write poetry, I have quite the collection of Rumi and Hafiz. And I think is a great, in reflection, a great way to help with these concepts, because the poetry ends up being that metaphor to sometimes explain the unexplainable and what's possible in that self-remembering and being on the other side of the gateway. So we could dive into a little Hafiz or Rumi today. We also...
Well, it seems like the common denominator is like what defined those two people. It seemed like they were, ecstatic. It seemed like love. There's a lot of love there. A lot of bliss. A lot of pursuit of...
Well, one of his books, the subject tonight is love. So love, bliss, even transcending death, birth, being in a moment of ecstasy, no matter what the circumstances are, which is a great aspiration for all of us. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what self-remembering leads to, then and I believe it is. That's really something that a road we want to understand, because if it leads us into ecstatic states of being and endless creativity and the ability to be grateful and to love one another fully. Wow, that's a heck of a path to get on. So
absolutely, and go ahead.
No.
Well, I was going to say, in crossing over that gateway, on the one side of the gate, suffering and grasping and everything is such a just an influence on us, and especially on the society today. And then if you begin to want to be on the other side of the gateway and access the ecstatic energy, what's interesting, when we look at the science of the universe, we're polarities. And right now on planet Earth, we're really being encouraged to be on one side or the other, on the suffering side or the ecstatic side in this conversation. But what's really powerful is, with all that juju that might be going towards suffering, there is an opposing force, which is that bliss, ecstasy, and creative impetus that is just as powerful in that moment. So it's kind of that interesting, when people look at when they're meeting their own adversity, if they could feel over on the other side of that gateway, they would be quite surprised at the inspiration and the creativity that can come through. And I think that's a testament to why a lot of artists create some pretty amazing masterpieces as a response to the polarity of their suffering.
Yeah, so all that self-observation and all that meditation and all that being present can be put into action. That's what a lot of these artists represent, is poetry in motion. And so poetry in motion is woohoo! It's fun. I hear that attributed to a lot of athletes too. How they move and how gracefully they move. Poetry in motion, baby.
Scientists, all of them. Poetry.
Self-remembering is the doorway to poetry in motion.
Absolutely.
We did go through those steps to get here, but what were some of those steps to get here? What was it? Remember the progression?
Yeah, we started out with self-observation, taking pictures of self and filing them away. Actually, observing the breath first, bringing us into the present moment, and then that self-observation, engaging in that aspect of ourself. And then from there, we start to engage, get a good sense of if our gatekeeper is awake, we engage with the gatekeeper if the gatekeeper is asleep. And then at that point, with all those pictures and all that present moment awareness, we start to divide our attention between ourself and maybe an object or an action, which assists us in that crossing over and really becoming active with our gatekeeper on that side of the gate.
Well, now you're getting into the realm of self-remembering. So,
right.
Some of the advantages of being able to self-remember in process are constant learning curve.
Absolutely.
Deep impression of the objective reality of the world around you, an ability to assess in real time how things are unfolding, the ability to shift your perception within the objective world in order to start to apply the natural laws of physics so as to understand who we are in relation to it. And then you start getting the metaphysical aspects, the return and the insight, the deep insight into how nature is functioning and how we function in relation to it. That's the gift of self-remembering.
Absolutely. And, within, just like a formal silent meditation or in this active moment of meditation, there's this space in between. I think Random Rab has a song called That Space in Between. It's in that space in between that really powerful things start to happen, and the mind empties, things fall away, the time and space can morph and expand, or can feel like it condensed. A long period of time could go by and it feels like minutes. So it's a beautiful process and exciting one. And I think that's why a lot of artists or people that are in deep into their mastery will feel like it's not them. They'll always hear that comment of, here I am, I'm just a conduit to this energy coming through. but I would give a lot of credit to them because they bring themselves into that state of being to allow themselves to express their mastery.
Yeah, I loved some of the insights in the Rumi in terms of his practice and how he went about consciously creating his poetry and his dancing around the pole. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sufis were big on the dance. The
Yeah,
whirling dervishes.
absolutely. Spinning.
That's a big deal. But the
You
dance
think
around
about
the
little
pole.
kids love doing that.
Yeah, dance around the pole, exactly. And he would generate the energy and the perspective moving around that pole while he was self-remembering.
Right.
And through that heightened state, through using his body to generate the physicality needed to create, a lot of those extraordinary realizations and discoveries came through that particular type of a practice. There's great lessons in it for us to understand what he's doing there. With not only how he's paying attention and he's perceiving himself in relation to the world, but then the conscientious understanding of generating a certain amount of energy in order to sort of heighten the states of consciousness, to pull himself up into a whole nother realm of existence, where clearly within the poetry you see somebody that's found bliss, you see somebody that seeing the finer aspects of existence, or what it is to be a divine human being. You should read one of his poems. You got one there?
Yeah. Well, as you were speaking, it was reminding me of Chris Lowe that we interviewed from the Shark Lab, which we need to have him back on our other show, Indie Creators in the JoyZone, because the whales, he talked about the whales spinning in circles at night in one direction and then the other. That's how they sleep, and they create a whirlpool for themselves, and so nature kind of shows us how to access some of these things through the directional movements that even sustain the planet and our movement around the sun. So it's fascinating contemplation. Maybe we should all run outside and spin around right now.
Well, that's the thing. From divided attention out into the world, there's a wonderful clearing that can happen. A lot of times we receive deep impressions from our imaginations, from things that we remember. Sometimes we need to take a moment to receive what we just saw and put it into our imaginations to analyze and to assess it. What's cool about self-remembering is there's no need to take that second step. While you're in the world perceiving it as such, the deep impression is already being perceived because there's no static. It's just you in relation to the world directly. It's like removing a buffer and completely allowing your senses to experience the world around you directly, to leave a deep impression on in your psyche. That's where the constant learning curve comes from. And by perceiving the world through certain laws, like the law of three or the law of octaves, and starting there in those more simplistic principles, the world starts to become a different kind of a place. It becomes a magical place. It becomes a place of movement and motion and fluidity, and takes on a different life. And as that consciousness rises within the individual practicing that particular skill that's developed, a deeper meaning in life emerges. And so within these poets, and within the whirling dervishes, and the mystical branch of Islam is the Sufi practice. What's really cool about it is the location of that particular practice takes a moment-to-moment, day-to-day tasks and turns those into potentially magical experiences,
Absolutely.
simply based on the understanding of being alive and appreciating being alive while you do the dishes, and the fact that you're in this body and it's functioning, and you kind of have a tendency to even look at the hand and from a different perspective, marvel at the mechanics of it and the fact that your soul exists within this physical form. Those sorts of realizations and discoveries make life special.
It's a
Yeah, you have a
sacred life that we get to embark on. And I think, to your point, it's, when we bring deep presence to all activity, we really are able to drop in with one another, with nature, with our ecosystem, our environment, ourself. And the possibilities are endless. There are no constraints. There's just possibilities, It's nice to clear out the mind and the past and feel into the full potential of the moment. So, are you still there? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. For some reason you went out for a second. Huh.
Yeah, there was a call coming in and it blacked out the screen.
Oh, okay. So I just opened up the book. So this is from Rumi, The Essential Rumi, translations by Coleman Barks and John Moyne. And I opened up to the page, Core of Masculinity. And so it goes, the core of masculinity does not derive from being male, nor friendliness from those who console. Your old grandmother says, maybe you shouldn't go to school. You look a little pale. Run when you hear that. A father's stern slap are better. Your bodily soul wants comforting. The severe father wants spiraling clarity. He scolds but eventually leads you into the open. Pray for the tough instructor to hear and act and stay within you. We have been busy accumulating solace. Make us afraid of how we are. So there's a little Rumi. And
that was a boring Rumi.
Okay, well, you want me to give you another one?
Come on, give us a juicy Rumi.
A juicy. I could give you a little Hafiz.
Where's the love, passion, dance?
Let's jump over here to. That's really profound if you listen to it carefully.
Oh, they're all profound and they're completely over my head. But
yeah, I think right there that
I can grasp a more passionate, visceral form of Rumi.
All right. Well, I'm going to read a little Hafiz for a second. Let me find one, and then
Hafiz.
So
keep in mind, these are poets that have jumped over to the other side through their art,
through
the craft
poem,
of self-remembering.
And I'll paste it on our page when we do the show. But the masculinity, and I think it's a great topic for right now because men have been basically demasculinized a lot, or their masculinity is being stripped away from them. And so Rumi is saying, you don't want your grandmother encouraging you to stay home and stay in bed. You want the masculine pushing you forward into action.
Yes.
And you want a stern instructor. You want the person that is going to, and that instructor comes from within. So our yang energy would, even in Chinese medicine would account for that, it's like a mountain. It's strong. It's still, it doesn't waver, it doesn't cower. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So
it wasn't a feminine dominated society back then for sure. But you can tell the health of the society. You can tell the health of the society was certainly determined by the internal fortitude of the men that were there.
Right. Well, and clearly, we can observe a lot from nature, but all the indigenous tribal leaders I've hung out with, they're very still, calm. They're not necessarily aggressive, but they have a power to them. And they do, when they teach, there's a sternness to them. and a very direct communication. So, all right, so let's see what comes out here. Speaking of dancing, so this is Hafiz. I saw you dancing. I saw you dancing last night on the roof of your home all alone. I felt your heart longing for the friend. I saw you whirling beneath the soft, bright rose that hung from an invisible stem in the sky. So I began to change into my best clothes in hopes of joining you, even though I lived 1,000 miles away. And if you had spun like an immaculate sphere just 2 more times, then bowed again so sweetly to the east, you would have found God and me standing so near and lifting you into our arms. I saw you dancing last night near the roof of this world. Hafiz feels your soul in mine, calling for our beloved.
Yeah, there's a passionate fellow right there. That's a passionate fellow right there.
Hafiz is
So that's what's cool about that is you can kind of see how he's seeing, and he's seeing clearly and openly and interpreting that one moment of realization, and how beautifully nuanced his perception was. And that's the whole point of this self-remembering. It is to sharpen our perception and to allow us to see into things and to capture the nuances of life and to not be numb to them.
Right.
You know, there's so much that's done to make us numb. Oh my God. Right?
Well, there's plenty to make us numb. And in that poem I love because he's sharing that there's no separation, there's no space between, as we were talking about, that, you know, even if you're thousands and thousands of miles away, one another can perceive and be, you know, as one. So, yeah, there are a lot of distractions that keep us from understanding that existence and the possibilities within it.
That's nice. The perception. I mean, you got to put that valuation on seeing into something.
Yeah.
That's the gift of higher states of consciousness and a reason to figure out what the self-remembering is, a reason to go into self-observation for years on end, a reason to enter into the present moment and to evoke higher states of awareness and to relax into the dance between yourself and the world around you.
Absolutely.
That's pretty much. You got another Rumi one there?
I do, but really quick, I want to give a shout out, you know, and let everyone know that.
Oh yes, shout outs.
Shout outs. This is Soul Vibes with Thomas Arnavani and Suzanne Toro. We are airing this on Oneness Talk Radio, in addition on iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Amazon, wherever you'd like to receive it, it's there, and make it easy for you. And we thank you for tuning in to Soul Vibes. All right, so you want another Rumi?
Yeah.
All right,
Let's go.
Just let this open up and be and see what happens. All right. There's two right side by side, but they're short. So I'm going to read the first one, and we'll see how you like it. Someone who goes with half a loaf of bread to a small place that fits like a nest around him. Someone who wants no more, who's not himself longed for by another else. He is a letter to everyone. You open it. It says, live. Shall I read that again?
Lots of juxtaposed, interesting options there to tell that story. But you read the other one. Read the next one.
The mystery does not get clearer by repeating the question. Not is it bought and going to amazing places until you've kept your eyes and your wanting still for 50 years. You don't begin to cross over from confusion. So, I think
I think there was a little. I think there was a little key in there. Can you read that one again?
yeah, and that it doesn't just happen overnight. The mystery does not get clearer by repeating the question, nor is it bought with going to amazing places until you kept your eyes and your wanting still for 50 years. You don't begin to cross over from confusion.
Ah, see now. See now. Now he's talking about a number of different steps.
Yeah.
He's talking about a lifetime of self-observation, a lifetime of being present, a lifetime to get through to the truth of who somebody may be.
Absolutely.
50 years is a long time, though. Let's just speed that up to several years.
Well, I don't think it's a long time in the sense of being an eternal being. That's like not even a half of a blink.
Well, I'm almost 50, so I guess it could take 50.
Is that so, Mr. Radavani? Oh, you're hilarious. All right. But the eternal being, that's not a long time.
Well, what's cool is that you get to see people that have reached their potential express themselves. And so, we want to be that person that reaches their potential so that we can express ourselves. So, the world can experience us as maybe God may have intended, which is probably very rare. But gosh, it's worth going for.
Absolutely.
You might as well. You might
start singing from the heavens above.
Yeah, you don't have to change your vocation. You don't have to change your life. You just need to perceive it in a particular way in order to get that gift that Rumi is suggesting, and to take all the gold that goes along with it.
Absolutely. Here's one more on love. I just happened to open up, and then freedom, which might lead us into that. This practice is a process, and in your light I learn how to love, in your beauty how to make poems. You dance inside my chest where no one sees you, but sometimes I do, and that sight becomes this art.
That's nice. Why don't you read that one again?
In your light, I learn how to love. In your beauty, how to make poems. You dance inside my chest, where no one sees you, but sometimes I do. And that sight becomes this art.
Nice. That's beautiful. So you can see, you can feel the bouncing between conditions and states, and possibly even coming across a partner with the same abilities you have in order to create a union, a perfect union of light. He could be talking about a lot of different things. We're assuming he's talking about a partner, but
I don't think he's talking about a partner. He's talking about God.
Yeah, but you could also assume that he's talking about some unique aspect of himself, like you said, a God, that dance between himself and God.
Yeah.
But it also, in an ideal world, he could be also materializing that between himself and an ideal relationship.
Right.
So,
well, God is always available in all our relationships. It's a matter if we want to access that.
Yeah.
And then in yoga, it's the inner union, really the ultimate marriage is within self, and then that whole self meets the world around you, your children, your partner, all those things.
The Immaculate Conception.
Well, I don't know about Immaculate Conception, but inner union with self.
That would be a Jesus story.
I know the Jesus story. I was married many times over. My whole childhood into high school, I was married.
That
I
would be
Jesus, I was married.
That would be the meaning of that particular story right there, in terms of the seed being planted by God and then the birth of a soul or a spirit. But it could. What's cool is that the high-minded aspect of it. I'm not sure. Rumi's what, 2,500 years ago?
Yeah, gosh,
1,600 years ago. I think it's. I can't.
Actually,
I don't think
I was reading something, which I'll bring up for another show. But yeah, it's a while back.
Yeah, but when we're sitting here, singing his praises and sending his vibrations out through the space again, and Rumi has never gone away. I think he's bigger now than he's ever been, ever.
Yeah, well, it's, again, the poetry is this great, like a movie or a great short story or story is a great way to teach. That's why indigenous tribes utilized song, a story, and poetry to communicate things that you can't always put into direct syntax or words to explain.
Yeah. Well, what I love about these Sufi poets too is that they seem to be holistic, and they seem to be, into the love thing and the dance and the movement and into the food and into the love making and kind of very, into life. It's a lot of poets are dark folks. They're living in a very dark place.
I think all poets are somewhat
they're kind of like
romantic.
reflecting on their suffering, and in a very unhealthy sort of a condition. But there's examples counter to that, like Gibran, who's just a 19th century guy. His life of alcoholism and poverty rendered such beautiful realizations and discoveries through his observation of the human dynamic. I mean, what an extraordinary poet he was too. But I'm not so much sure that he was conscientiously using his art to increase his level of consciousness as purposeful or as what's the word I'm looking for? Or as deliberate, or as deliberate as Rumi and Hafiz, and you get all the, gosh, I mean, every aspect of that particular culture that Sufi culture is really magical. It is mystical, and it's a practical approach to attaining your potential within your day-to-day, moment-to-moment existence without really changing any activities that you have in your life. I think that's really what's cool about it.
Yeah, the bliss is always there, and it's really just it's interesting because it is a subtle shift, and sometimes it's easier to make that shift than others. But as Rumi mentioned, it can take 50 years to shake off the confusion and step back on the other side of the gateway that we've known many times over. I think it's also good to share with the listeners that in this state of being, these seemingly miraculous things happen, not things necessarily to grasp at, but to really be present with. And just like a poem, there's many layers to sometimes of those moments where you are in you're the swirling diva dancing, and things start dropping in, and you might see them one way, but over time they might yield some additional information for you and feed that which you're creating, your life around you.
Yeah, so this is, what's cool is this is attainable. This is attainable within this lifetime. It's probably
attainable right now.
Yeah, it's applicable too. It's an extraordinary journey, and I'm just shocked that this culture doesn't conscientiously embrace the cornerstone to go into just overall health,
Yeah, well, you can
balance, and
imagine.
harmony, and all of that stuff. I think this practice applied massively would just eliminate half the health problems in this country, and certainly completely destroy the mental health issue that we have.
Yeah, you can imagine if one was taught to be in the space. I just sent actually my goddaughter a Hafiz book. The subject tonight is love. And, you know, if you're allowed to interact with some mastery at a young age, that can really influence you. Even if you don't live it 24/7, maybe with your family, it'll carry with you into your adulthood, which is rather exciting. And it'd be even more exciting if they really showered the young children of the world with some of these concepts early on in their education.
Well, yeah. Hello. Hello.
I mean, I was
just
blessed.
talking about just. I think they're becoming more open. I think public schools, and because of the drug issues and the lack of parents that are willing to discipline their children responsibly, and all the problems that are arising, I think the public schools are becoming this conduit for which meditation is actually being proposed, yoga is being proposed, and actually not proposed, that the school systems are actually aggressively going after it because the kids are just losing their marbles.
Yeah, well, you know, having taught in some of those environments, it's almost like, from my perspective, is the kids don't need it as much as the parents and the teachers need it, because kids are really in harmony quite naturally with nature.
Yeah,
but
that's a great point.
If they're around a really stressed out teacher or parents or abusive parents, it impacts them, you know, and they're holding a lot, and they're probably better to go run like mad out on the play yard and swirl around like a diva or hang from a tree for their state of well-being. And then the teachers can meditate for a little bit, and the parents and do some asana and breath work, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always astounded that you know it's such a popular thing to save the children, but it's really scary when the state is trying to save your children from you.
Right.
It's like, wait a second, you need to re-educate the adults so that they can raise their own children responsibly. It's easier to do that than it is to do that for a kid on a state level. So when somebody says the kids are important, I'm thinking, well, the parents and the adults that are raising the kids are more important, that they're informed as to how to go about stabilizing themselves and then therefore stabilizing their responsibilities. I always laugh at that. But look at the steps. You know, observing the body breathing. Millions of ways to become present. Just gazillions of ways, but one is just to sit there and observe body breathing. The key to observing body breathing, observation. When one goes into observation, the intellect quiets down and creates the space to experience the relaxation, and then a few moments later, possibly the heightened levels of perception that come along with that. And it's in that switch where the relaxation kicks in, and that the thoughts automatically start to diminish, and then this experience of you directly to the world around you starts to happen, and that's the key. That's the window in to then self-observation, conscientiously then walking around the world with that state of trying to maintain that state of mind and trying to get to re-know yourself for the first time.
Right.
And then redefining your values and getting the gatekeeper to stay awake as long as possible to sort of discern what it needs from what may hurt it, hurt the organism, and then moving into developing enough self-discipline, or enough discipline, enough Qi, enough Te, enough integrity within the body to begin this concept of self-remembering, which is an emotionally centered activity that really fills you up with light. And it's from that place that you start to gain some great insight into where the minds of great people are and where the great artists, anything great moves through this space.
Right.
And it's attainable by anybody. And it can be done doing anything. Yeah,
it can be done right now.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly attempting it as I do this. The valuation of even this experience in this interview would be less than without that effort.
Absolutely.
Would be less.
Well, and to be noted, for the listeners, there's a great ease. So a lot of time, especially right now, a lot of people are being encouraged to do shadow work. They're being encouraged to just really fight more than find the ease and the bliss. And just reading, a couple of these poems like brightens my soul so happy because I love reading poetry and sitting and contemplating it, and so throughout our day we have a choice, where we want to engage, how we want to engage. And, by one of the steps that Thomas took us through with dividing attention, if, like for me, I'm staring at a camera right now, and then, if I divide my attention from there to here, something really magical happens, and there's so much more to access versus if I'm in my mind or maybe in my emotive center, I'm not really present with this space in between. So, it's quite simple, yet we resist it quite a bit.
Well, within this teaching, within the Sufi teaching, they call it removing buffers. So you're moving the imaginary buffer that gets projected out into the space which is basically, they also refer to that as false personality. Mm. And so the reason for self-observation would be to relearn oneself so that the false personality has been programmed on the wrong basis can be reprogrammed based on your own objective observations of yourself in relation to the world around you.
Right, and now
that false personality becomes less of a factor when the gatekeeper gets strengthened.
Right. Yeah, you're clear on who you are and how you're going to show up, similar to.
Yeah, and there's also concepts called essence and personality, and within most of us, our personalities far outweigh our essences, and so that has to become balanced again in order for what we really are to rise up and to be in harmony with our personality. Our personalities, as Americans, we have developed personalities. The ideas of ourselves supersede the truth of ourselves. Yeah. And so, through self-observation and through simply becoming present, the personality begins to harmonize out, and the essence starts to come on up, and then we find an equilibrium. Then we have a different type of harmony in relation to ourselves, in relation to the world. So those are really important things, but those problems are out through the practice of becoming present and accumulating enough presence to go into self-observation mode, and then garner enough strength through self-observation to begin to re-educate aspects of ourselves which can discern what we need based on what we want, and then we're moving directly into the attempts at self-remembering, which completely means that when we're able to self-remember, we're moving into the higher realms of analysis of the world around us, and we start entering into the metaphysics of our journey.
And it's I think an important key is David Hawkins does a great job at describing, these vibrational states. He actually measured them, energetic states based on states of being in a human being. But as we cross over, you start to have objective, rational understanding of where you are, as you would say, Thomas, in time and space, and are able to really employ that. And then with that understanding, you start to access, Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness, true love, true compassion, true empathy. It's not one that's placated and grasping and suffering on the other side of the gate. And that essence is really shared, and then we become really aware of our innate gifts that are intended to be of service to ourselves and others, and those efforts become quite effortless and really energize our system in a way that it's not something you have to really work hard at. At that point, it's just this thing that keeps regenerating and feeding you because you're in right action at that point.
Yeah, that's a good right action is a good terminology. The Sufis also referenced a man of action or a woman of action as somebody who has a singular will, consciousness, and the ability to do. And that defines a person on the journey. Singular will, consciousness, and the ability to take action.
Yep. And we all can do that.
Well, what's being suggested there is a person that understands how to self-remember, because once that self-remembering kicks in, those things become the central qualities or defining qualities of somebody who has entered into higher states of consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Hafiz and Rumi are these guys that have walked the walk, and we get to get a sense of who they are through their words. And that's what's exciting about you reading those words, because we're listening to the words of people that have become divine and realized their potential on this earth.
Well, and it's still giving, and that's the power of, our thoughts, our words, our actions. We could scribe something in stone and leave it for centuries to come, and then it'll keep yielding energy. And the same with our actions, our imprints, our thoughts, those words that we share with one another. And we can definitely feel from these, there's if you sit with them, and maybe it meets you instantaneously, or maybe it takes some time, there's a lot of energy behind them. I would love to read one more as we get closer to the...
Oh, read a ton more.
Okay, so this is Rumi, and drums sound rises on the air. It throbs my heart. A voice inside the beat says, I know you're tired, but come. This is the way. Are you jealous of the ocean's generosity? Why would you refuse to give this joy to anyone? Fish don't hold the sacred liquid in cups. They swim the huge fluid freedom.
Well, there you go. There you go. All those wonderful analogies and representing the other side of the fence. It's a beautiful thing about poetry too, is that the description of higher states of consciousness, or what it is to be on the other side, or step on through to the other side, is reflected in this poetry. And the words of the poet come from the other side. Yes. That's what's really cool. The metaphors, the analogies, the direct experience, the insights that a singular word can't capture, but juxtaposed imagery can. Those are really signs of genius right there. Yeah, genius for sure.
Yeah.
Genius.
Transcending words and poetry. to share and give and teach are very powerful. So that's fun to share. So, the other thing I was leafing through, because I actually included in my book one of Hafiz's poems, and then I flipped to one towards the end of the book that I wrote. But one thing to share with the listeners, I think, to understand is when you enter into these states of bliss and mastery and flow and refining oneself, and as Rumi said, shaking off that 50-year confusion or more, maybe it's billions of years of confusion, you start to feel at peace, an inner peace with self, no matter what the circumstances are. And that also helps you retain that present moment awareness, because if we're feeling stress or anxiety or grasping at something, that's going to take us out of this present moment where the magic does unfold and the creation energy is ready and available to all of us to utilize for whatever simple tasks we have, or maybe that great painting, great next book, that film, in the lab for a scientist, or during surgery for a surgeon. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think that word confusion is was that Rumi? Rumi used the word confusion, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the
Shake off the confusion.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note what he's referencing in terms of identifying confusion. Why would he use the word confusion? What's he referencing? And basically, he's referencing a normal life, a life of seemingly mundane tasks that don't add up to much of anything, or being involved and reactive into all sorts of silly mundane things, but yet we're in this divine body and have this divine soul right alongside of it. We're idiots and geniuses at the same time, so that can be confusing.
We're Zorba the Greek and Buddha all at once.
I think he's referencing that sort of hypocrisy or paradox that exists as being a human. It is confusing being a human. It is hard to know without leadership or without a practice or without really good teachers to learn where our place is in the universe and how to make this life significant and to realign itself with its divine energy, which is we're surrounded by continually by the Earth's intelligence.
Yeah.
But these people have managed to realign themselves with the Earth's intelligence, along with the conscious beings we know about. The ones that have managed to survive, like Epictetus and Abraham Lincoln and Walt Whitman. There's a conscious poet right there, American poet right there.
Absolutely.
Who else we would say is conscious? Who became conscious? You got the Gandhis, you got the great spiritual leaders, you got the Martin Luther Kings, you have. I'm sure there's just tons and tons of other people that have crossed over, especially in the martial arts realms, the samurai, all these wonderful bodhisattvas and Lao Tzu and all these extraordinary teachers, playwrights, actors, writers, entertainers that have even crossed over to Eleanor Dusa seemed to be a conscious being on this planet. She seemed to have found the key and used it to represent her work on the highest of levels. And we know it was the highest of levels because of the impact she had on her audience. And we're speaking her name to this day. But it's a famous conscious being like a Christ. It's just one rock star, one rock star amongst a lot of rock stars that have, possibly given their lives to represent the ideal of what an ideal human is.
Yeah, and also if Rumi and Hafiz were sitting right here, so they are, their essence has been with us in the show, they would have been still writing, and that dipping a little deeper into these states of consciousness, because it's so vast. You can't really say there's a final destination, but it's pretty fascinating to keep exercising in it and see what occurs through that process.
Well, they've all entered into the realm that we're suggesting that's accessible to all of us, that universal thread that holds within it all the wisdom, that we can channel that wisdom when we practice in the right way, practice in a way that opens ourselves, like you said, making right efforts prepares us to receive that sort of wisdom.
Yeah.
And there's reasons for buffers. There's reasons why it takes work. The shock of becoming conscious all at once, I guess some drugs actually create that for people, can overwhelm the organism. It can shut it down. It can be too much.
Right, and so that's even when people are encouraging people to quote unquote, wake up. If we woke up to, all of it at once, and I'm not talking about...
It would be a mess. It would be a bloody
mess. It could end up people could go into psychosis because it's hard to do all that.
That would definitely be an ugly scene for everybody to wake up all at once.
Well, that would go into that singular point.
It'd be shocking. So we have to earn that stripping away of everything that's not us, kind of like that old Michelangelo saying.
Absolutely.
How did Michelangelo, create David? Well, he chipped away everything that wasn't David. So there's a nice metaphor for us in there in terms of human beings. We want to chip away everything that's not really us and be left with this divine, divine consciousness.
And that's an important, Samuel Ware talked about, the 54,000 faces of our ego, and that this is this beautiful process, and it's not necessarily, you don't have to rush through it, but if you do exercise the efforts daily, it does bring you into, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit deeper next week, just about brings us into these higher states of integrity from inside out, and life becomes a little bit just more clear and effortless. I think that's why in like yoga and you study Chinese medicine, there's a simplicity, the Tao, that happens. It's not so complicated. It's just being willing to be in that state of presence with self in the world.
Well, like the word remember, like the terminology says, remember yourself. So half the challenge is just remembering to remember what to do.
Yeah.
Or remembering what to remember, what's relevant, what's important. How do I, and then going about the return of redirecting your attention and dividing it in such a way that you're in direct connect with the world around you and have the ability to observe things as they unfold and develop a different relationship to time. It's that shift of perspective that makes life fuller, and it becomes a real-time endeavor as opposed to a chronos time clock.
It becomes a space endeavor. Forget time; it becomes space. That's kind of
if every breath is relevant, and we learn to catch every breath, then our relationship to time is one breath at a time, observing one breath at a time.
Yeah.
And the quality. What's cool about this is all observable. It's seeable. Like even the quality of somebody's breath can reflect the quality of their consciousness. An individual that's aligned themselves breathes in a particular type of a pattern. Those that are less present have a different type of a breath. It can be more sporadic, out of rhythm.
Yeah.
So the observable aspects of consciousness and also the health benefits of consciousness. Fountain of youth is found in these practices, which is really, really important to note that that fountain of youth has everything to do with perspective and everything to do with self-remembering. So if you're interested in the fountain of youth and really want to find it, these practices are the gateway and the window into that particular understanding.
Absolutely. Nature's regenerative. We're part of nature, so there's no biological order as we've been taught in our in biology class. So, should I read Tripping Over Joy as we exit out here?
Sure.
And maybe we can give everyone a little summary after this. This is Hafiz. Tripping over joy. What is the difference between your experience of existence and that of a saint? The saint knows that the spiritual path is a sublime chess game with God, and the beloved has just made such a fantastic move that the saint is now continually tripping over joy and bursting out in laughter and saying, "I surrender." Whereas, my dear, I'm afraid you still think you have 1,000 serious moves.
Well, there you go. That was a great summary of our little talk.
So
Couldn't wrap it up any better than that. How much time we got left?
we're at it. So what?
We're out of time.
Well, it's fine. So I think. Well,
How much time do we have left? That was not a rhetorical question.
We're past the time, so we're fine.
We're past the time, you said?
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
we'll play the exit, and let's get back to this next week and then expand on it. Find some more
Okay.
artists and
So-
expand on the craft of self-remembering.
The Craft of Self-Remembering. You've been with Thomas Artavani and Suzanne Toro on Oneness Talk Radio. This is Soul Vibes, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.